Hello, everybody, and good evening. I'm Don Arleth, and you're watching World Talks here on TVP World. USAID has been targeted for closure by billionaire Elon Musk, who's been tasked by the president with shrinking the size of the federal government. A senior White House official speaking on condition of anonymity has said that Trump is considering merging USAID with the State Department and has put Elon in charge of overseeing the agency's performance. A group of Democratic lawmakers, cheered by dozens of laid-off agency employees and contractors, staged a protest in front of USAID headquarters, which was closed to employees. And now let's bring in Chawla, CEO of from London Politica, to discuss exactly how sharp cuts to the U.S. aid operations will affect global charity work. Hello there, Manas, and thank you very much for joining us here on TVP World today.
Pleased to be with you, Don.
Yes, now looking at these deep cuts, in the short term, because this is supposed to last about 3 months, at least that's what we were initially told. But if we look at the size of the operations for USAID, they total about $50 billion a year. How do you think in the short term this is going to affect all of the great charity work, if you will, that USAID performs throughout the globe?
Well, one of the certainties in Trump's second term is, in fact, that there are no certainties in Trump's second term. And so the fact that we've been given a 3-month initial audit period in which USAID operations are going to be reviewed, there's a very low likelihood, in my opinion, that stays to just 3 months. I think this is part of Trump's broader overhaul of international development strategy. And I think that he's looking to set in stone a much more permanent cut of the United States' foreign aid budget. And this move has already sent shockwaves throughout the entire global aid system. The United States is the world's biggest spender on international development. It spends on everything from offering polio vaccinations in countries where the disease still circulates to helping stop the spread of viruses that have the potential to cause a pandemic. And that's when we haven't even mentioned the crucial funding that they've been providing in places like Ukraine, where they've covered fuel for evacuation vehicles, salaries for aid workers, legal psychological support. All of these things now not only hang in the balance, but leave charities, leave humanitarian organizations in a really precarious spot to have to, cobble together any remaining funds they have to hold on to their critical aid workers, pay them just enough salaries for the next 3 months to sustain operations and hope that there's some sense of reprieve afterwards.
And if we look at the continuity of government that we usually see in American politics, it seems to me like Trump is trying to treat the American political system more like a parliamentary one. What will this do to American credibility, American reliability abroad, if such critical decisions like this can just change with the person in the White House and radically reverse decisions that are usually long-term decisions?
Don, I think you point to one of the most crucial things there. The United States has been a pillar of the liberal international order for as long as we've known it in the last sort of 75 or so years, but also a pillar of international development. And by doing such a move, Trump is showing the world that everything, all assumptions are under question, including the most sort of basic ones. I think cutting the USAID budget so drastically and so quickly is one thing, and the sort of material influence that has on the charities and communities it supports, and the loss of American credibility there is a huge problem. But an equally bigger problem is simply the way in which that this was done. Had Donald Trump said and outlined this as a major policy proposal as part of his manifesto going into this election, had he lobbied Congress, tried to pass pass a bill through Congress to either shut USAID or merge it with the U.S. State Department, right? It would at least show that he's adhering to the democratic principles, norms that would govern how an American president thinks about major international decisions like these. Frankly, he's not done that. He's largely tasked Elon Musk, that leads an unofficial government efficiency department, uh, to sort of gut USAID of all of its critical infrastructure, its core operations, and that's created a lot of domestic discord within the United States. You saw Elon Musk unable to actually access the sensitive financial data that USAID holds on some of its key programs, simply because it would be unlawful for those USAID security officers to give that up, especially to someone that doesn't have an official government sanctioned role, and especially in the sort of current political climate. And so, what I'm trying to say is that the way that they've gone about doing this signals, a democratic dysfunction, a domestic dysfunction within the United States that is as much a loss in credibility around the world as that is the sort of as the material uh, gap they're going to remain after USAID ceases operations.
Yes, and it seems that Trump wants to be able to just implement his policy from day one, affecting a broad spectrum of American institutions, USAID included. We'll just have to see. But another issue that they have cited with USAID is wasteful spending and abuse. I want to just point out a few things that the White House put out yesterday. And this is what they are citing as, here are just a few examples of the waste, all caps, and abuse, again, all caps. Okay, they identified $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities, $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. The list goes on to cite just two more positions. But if these are the top of their list, what they're citing as major waste and abuse, quote unquote, the numbers don't quite add up. And I'm just wondering if this is absolutely the best that they can do when you're looking at $50 billion in spending and can only identify a couple $1 million.
I mean, I think you're absolutely correct about that. The specific programs that they can target and the ones specifically that they can politicize only amount to a couple of $1 million. And had they conducted a targeted cut, which frankly would have been much easier, much more politically feasible and palatable, it would have made very little difference to the global, international development architecture, to the United States' standing in that system. But what they've tried to do is to cherry pick a few $1 million worth of aid programs, right? Effectively less than 1% of USAID's entire budget. And make it seem that that is emblematic and symbolic and representative of the rest of the $55 billion, which it's absolutely not. But in doing so, I think they fed into, quite frankly, the public opinion in the United States, which has always been in favor of cutting foreign aid significantly. This has been consistently the case since the 1970s. The reason it hasn't happened is because successive administrations, whether Republican or Democrat, realized that not only is this a moral good, a moral interest, but it's also a pragmatic and strategic interest, right? Maintaining these aid partnerships strengthens their bilateral relationships with countries around the world. It helps prevent problems that could later become problems at home. Remember, a large part of the USAID budget goes towards stopping the spread of viruses that could become pandemics, which is obviously a huge concern in the aftermath of COVID-19. But more than anything, it's one of the clearest ways it has to support American alliances, to show American alliances that these are robust, long-standing commitments, not just sort of temporary promises that can be overturned on the whim of a president, and that's an assumption that Donald Trump has broken. And so I think what you see happening here isn't an isolated case. I think what you see happening throughout Trump's handling of the entire government is a politicization of what are the sort of the core functions, and then cherry picking a few things to make them seem representative of the larger whole, which he then proceeds to gut for this politicized agenda.
Yes, well, it continues to be a work in progress. Manas Chawla, CEO at London Politica, thank you very much for joining me and discussing these very important matters. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.